If you will, stand at this time for our prayer and pledge of allegiance. Father, we're thankful to you for this day, for blessings you've given us. We thank you for a new year, new opportunities. And Father, we now just pray that you'll guide us to this meeting. May we have the wisdom we need to conduct the business at hand. Father, we pray that we'll conduct ourselves in a way that respects each other and honors you. We're thankful to you for this county, for our political leaders, for our first responders, for our county staff, for those that have made this meeting possible and preparing for it. So, Father, we just thank you for all of these things and just pray that you'll guide us in this time. We pray all this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time I'm going to do a roll call. President Daniel Nance. Here. Brandon Bias. Here. Ernie Church.
Here.
Robert Davis. Here. Plumber Tonsmeyer. Here. Jason Padgett. Here. Michael Mullet. Here. Greg Seibert.
Here.
Bill Booger.
Here.
We have everybody tonight. That's excellent. All right, you have a copy of the minutes to both our meetings. Our last meetings we had a work session on December the 2nd. I'm going to start with that. Let's have a motion. Does anybody have any corrections to that? If not, I'll have a motion that they be approved.
Second.
Mr. Padgett's made a motion to approve.
A second.
Church. Mr. Church. All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now for our regular minutes for the December 2nd Planning Commission meeting. Any corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion we approve them as
Mr.
printed.
Mullick's made the motion to approve.
Second.
Who was that?
Bill.
I'm sorry, Mr. Booger. Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Okay, we welcome you to our meeting tonight. Let me just cover a few things before we get started. Hopefully, if you have an interest in speaking to any of the items in the agenda tonight, you have signed up out front before you came in. Those sheets will be brought to me, and at the appropriate time, I will call on you to come to the podium and state your name and address, and we'll give you the opportunity to voice either your opposition or whether you're in favor of the project and your concerns. So please fill those sheets out so that I'll have a record of those here to call you up at that time. In case somebody slips in, I will give everybody an opportunity to speak. Keep this in mind. We'll open the public hearing and give everybody an opportunity to speak. But once I close the public hearing, please do not ask to speak after that point. Sometimes we seem to have folks get real disappointed, but once we close the public hearing, I will not allow anybody else to come up and speak after that point. If you have a cell phone, if you will, mute those so that those will not cause any interruption. All right. We have several items tonight. Subdivisions and zoning, rezoning cases or zoning cases will be first. We are going to take one of our items and move it up. This is item 7C, the Davison property. This is case number Z21-000007. Hopefully I got all those correct. We will move this item to the beginning of our agenda and hear it first. Let me ask, is there anyone on the Planning Commission that's had any prior communications you need to declare on this item? Okay, not Matthew.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commissioners. I do want to thank each of you for your service on this Planning Commission. It is kind of neat to see this full slate of Planning Commissioners up here, and it really speaks to your commitment to Baldwin County and the work that's being done in Baldwin County. And I know it's not like you get a lot of pay for this or anything like that, and you're going to stand up and have to make tough decisions probably even tonight. And so we appreciate that service, so thank you for that. This first case, I'm not going to repeat the case number, is the Davison estate property. It's a rezoning request from RA to RMF6. Also want to highlight that the lead staff member on this was Linda Lee. We do have a number of our team members out tonight on unplanned leave. And so I want to give a shout out to them for their hard work in preparing these reports, and that those of us will stand up here and look like we've done all the work on them, but it's actually those folks. And then also we have a number of folks standing in tonight. And you'll see that the names don't match on a number of these presentations. I want to give a shout out to the team members here who've had to shift a lot of workloads this past week to make sure they were prepared for these cases tonight. So thank you to everybody involved in this. All right, this is in Planning District 10. It's currently zoned RA. The location of the subject property is on the east side of Stagecoach Road. And I'm also pointing out it's on the south side of, I'm probably going to say this incorrectly, but Plaza de Torres Drive. So I apologize for butchering that. And but that is not a public road. That's a private road owned by the Board of Education. And they'll probably have some comments about that here shortly. You'll see the parcel number there. Current use is vacant. It's just a wooded lot. It's 37 acres. See the not really a set physical address right now on there. See the applicant is SE Civil. See the current owner listed for the property there. So the proposed zoning is RMF6, which is multi-family district. That obviously means you can put some type of apartment complex or townhome on there. The proposed use is apartments. The applicant's request, they would like to construct a townhome apartment development similar to Toro Ridge. I do like to remind everybody at this point with a rezoning request, and it's important to understand this from both sides of the coin. When someone comes in and says, this is what I'm going to do with this property, can I get it rezoned? We don't actually have any control over their ultimate use once it gets rezoned. Once it gets rezoned, they can do all the things listed in that allowable zoning. I also want to point out that just because you see an apartment complex schematic shown on the screen, that you're not approving those apartments tonight or considering that for approval. You're just making a recommendation about the actual rezoning of this lot. I just want to point out in the blue arrow on the screen those existing apartments that this will be adjacent to, and I'll let the applicant comment on this. I believe it's the same developer of those adjacent apartments based on our meetings with them, but I'm going to let them comment on that. You also see with the yellow arrow here the location of that Board of Education property in Spanish Fort High School. So just some of the adjacent zoning. To the north you have Spanish Fort. To the south you have a strip of RSF1 and then more Spanish Fort area. That's actually another apartment complex down there. I'll highlight that a little bit later. To the east you have RMF6. You also have some RA. You also have the city of Spanish Fort there. And then to the west you have RSF1 and RA, Rural Agricultural District. And the adjacent land uses are institutional high school, residential, vacant apartments, and then residential timberland. All right, one thing that I think is a little bit confusing with this site is the access. So this is a quick map that I pulled off the revenue viewer, and we're going to zoom in here on this access point. This wasn't actually in your agenda packet. I added it for the purposes of the presentation tonight. I thought there might be some confusion about this. So if you zoom in, there's this really small strip of right-of-way that provides some access to this property. The applicant's proposing to use this as their access. And because that's the only piece of public right-of-way that this property has access to, the sign noticing this was placed at that location. Sometimes those are tricky to find out what's the appropriate place, and we felt that this was the most appropriate place in terms of where they were going to have access. One thing I want to note here is that any future development, that applicant's going to have to work out possibly expanding that access before he can even reach this property in a way that complies with the subdivision regulations. So just here's some photos of the adjacent property. There's a subject sign with site with the sign posted. There's a home there. Adjoining properties to the south, property across the street. Current zoning requirements are rural agriculture. You all are familiar with this, but it generally allows agricultural uses. Timberland, of course, is the current use out there right now, but it's a very low impact, low intensity zoning in our zoning ordinance. Proposed use is RMF 6, and you can look in 4.9.2 there. We have that on the screen. I know it's small, but this is right out of the agenda packet that we sent out. You can see it allows multifamily dwellings, two-family dwellings, single-family dwellings. There's a whole gamut of things that's allowed in there. All right, so this is the schematic that's been provided to us in terms of what is being proposed for this site. Again, we remind everybody this is just a schematic. You have to be careful about saying, wow, this looks like a nice development, it has all these features. We don't know what's going to actually come into place other than that they're proposing some type of apartment complex. All right, so to approve a rezoning, we go through a multi-factor analysis, and we're going to talk a little bit about how staff arrived at its conclusion. And I do want to pause here to briefly say and thank Planning Commissioner member Greg Siebert, who recommended last month that we communicate with the school board on our rezoning requests. And so we did that, but we did fumble a little bit, and that's my fault. I think the emails were sent directly to the elected school board members instead of the appropriate staff individuals, and I appreciate the staff members I've been able to work with here in the past 24 hours. We have a new list of 4 email addresses that are really ideal points of contact to get these to, and so we apologize about that, but we're glad to have many representatives of the school board here tonight to comment on this project. We also received information from the city of Spanish Fort, and we have Mayor McMillan here as well, and so both of those things are new things that are going to be coming before you tonight in addition to what that we did not have in front of us at the time we prepared this staff report. So real quickly on the factors that we consider, factor number 1 is the requested change compatible with the existing development pattern and the zoning of nearby properties. And I'm just going to highlight here that even though the existing property is RA, that area has seen continued growth and development. And I know a lot of folks want to say, but it's too much growth in development. Well, if people feel like it's too much growth in development without any other basis or connection to utilities being able to service it or infrastructure capabilities, that alone is not necessarily what we consider. We say, is this a natural transition? In zoning, we look at a compatibility or a transition from more intense uses to less intense uses. So we look at commercial and then higher density residential and then easing out to lower density residential and then rural areas after that. And essentially what we have here is kind of a rural pocket in the middle of some high intensity zonings and then residential zonings and institutional zonings beyond that. And so we believed based on that and subject to public input, which you're going to hear tonight, that this was a reasonable transition of uses in this location. Has there been a change in conditions upon which the original zoning designation was based? As you know, that zoning in Baldwin County is a citizen-led process. Citizens have to petition and then have an election before zoning's in their area. So we take it very seriously when we change a zoning because they voted and this zoning was put in place. The zoning was approved in 2006. That's 16 years ago, and a lot has changed in terms of the intensity of uses as they continue to expand up in that area, in the unzoned area of Baldwin County, or the zoned area of Baldwin County right there. Does the proposed zoning better conform with the master plan? The master plan's interesting in this area. It just designates the future use of the property to whatever its current use is. We're currently updating our master plan. So the future land use designation is agriculture. And an amendment to the future land use map would be required to change to residential if this gets approved. And residential accommodates single-family dwellings, two-family, and multifamily dwellings in that future land use map. Will the proposed change conflict with existing or planned public improvements? So you'll see the update note here at the bottom. So staff is unaware of any planned public improvements. We consulted with our highway department on this. Will the proposed change adversely affect traffic patterns and congestions? And we talk about the functional classification and the collectors and arterials in the area, and noting that this is just a rezoning change and that a full traffic study and potential improvements would be required during the subdivision phase of this development. We noted that there were no known traffic issues at this stage. However, I have this update on the screen based on recent communication with representatives of the Baldwin County Public School System. There's some concern regarding the intensity increase of this property and how that will impact Plaza de Toros Drive South and its connection to Jimmy Faulkner Drive. And then after I typed this in, I also received the mayor's letter, which raised similar concerns, including with Stagecoach, that connection to US 3001 there. So those are considerations that you're going to hear here shortly from those folks. Number 6 is the proposed amendment consistent with the development patterns in the area, appropriate for the orderly development of the community. And number 7 is the proposed amendment, the logical expansion of adjacent zoning districts. So I want to show this location map up here. And again, I want to help the Planning Commission understand how staff came to its conclusion prior to receiving this additional input. So if you notice in blue on here is the property that's in question. In yellow on here are existing multifamily developments in that area. And sometimes folks will say, well, look, there's already so much multifamily there, more multifamily isn't appropriate. Well, when zoning, when you're looking to cluster similar uses next to each other, otherwise they're getting scattered throughout and you have almost like an urban sprawl of uses taking place within the community. So we felt that this was a natural transition. In purple, and of course there's a lot more of this further down, but in purple you have storage units and you have commercial type uses. So again, that's that transition from more intense uses to less intense uses, where you will see residential there up in the top left of the map. The next factors discuss timing, environmental impacts, health and safety impacts. Some of that you'll hear public input on, and that's why we have a public hearing, and then other matters that may be appropriate. See here, we reach out to the Highway Department and then also got subdivision input. We have a very rigorous subdivision review process. As each of you are aware, wetland delineations will be analyzed and will be required to be submitted. There'll be a traffic study that will be reviewed, and the drainage study will be reviewed, but that's a second phase that can't even move forward until rezoning takes place. We received no comments back from ADEM. Updated here from the Baldwin County School Board. We did receive that concern, and you're going to be hearing from representatives of the school board here during the public comments period. And then Spanish Fort, we've handed you a copy of the letter from the mayor. We've also emailed it to each of you. But I just wanted to highlight the first paragraph that they reached out expressing their opposition to the request to rezone, and I believe the mayor's going to address the Planning Commission here shortly. So this is a leap from rural agricultural to multifamily district, RMF 6. And the reason staff's recommendation came forward is because we believe it falls in the natural transition from more intense uses to less intense uses in that area. The concerns about whether or not we have, I'm going to use the word infrastructure, but in that I'm talking about all public services that support this development. Do those exist to support this leap? That's a decision that this Planning Commission will be considering as we continue to hear from the public during this public hearing. So just our quick summary, subject property is currently RA. The property is located east of Stagecoach Road. The adjoining properties are single family and multifamily residential, and then that's transitioning away from more intense commercial uses. The staff's recommendation prior to the input that we received in the past 24 hours was approval. And we do want to make sure that you all understand that none of that additional input from the City of Spanish Fort or the school board was taken into consideration when we prepared this staff report and recommendation. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Does anybody on Planning Commission have any questions for staff? Okay. This time, I'll give the applicant the opportunity to do the presentation, Mr. Deal. I assume you're going to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Deal with SE Civil. Just a couple quick points. We, fully agree with the staff report and recommendations, and certainly we will comply with all the requirements that would be required in the next step when we go to the actual engineering design and approval from this board at that time. But even though this is just, the land use hearing part of it, we've gone ahead and initiated a traffic impact study with Neil Schaefer, and that's ongoing. Although we don't have it at this point in it, I had contacted him today. They don't see any major issues at this point, but I don't have a completed study. Wetlands, we've already had those delineated. There are some up in the northeast corner, which we will address. As far as access, as Matthew pointed out, there was a small strip of public right-of-way there. The developer's also purchasing the 1 acre parcel next to that. So we're going to add to that existing, I think it's existing 30 feet. We're going to add to that with the parcel they're purchasing. So we'll have plenty of access from Stagecoach Road. Also, in talking with the developer who's here tonight, if you have any detailed questions, the concern about the connection with this development to the existing Toro Ridge, which it'll be the same type of units, we're happy not to make that connection to that existing one if that's a concern of traffic, going that way instead of Stagecoach. I would like to point out with the recent ALDOT improvements on 31, both Highway 31 and Stagecoach Road now have left turn lanes, and that intersection is signalized. So that's pretty much all I have. If a commission has any questions.
Okay. Anybody in the Planning Commission have any questions, Mr. Deal? Okay. Thank you. I have Sean Marie Jernigan signed up in favor. Sure you can. All right, so I have several signed up in opposition. I would only ask that you try to keep your comments as brief as possible. We'll try to stay within 3 minutes since there are so many. Try not to repeat what someone else has said. You can just say that I concur with the previous speaker, but be sure and get all your comments that if there's something different. So I want to start with John Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, myself, John and Ray are both speaking on behalf of the school board. He's asked I would speak first if that's chairman's.
Okay, that'd be fine.
I don't know where the stop clock is for 3 minutes, but I'll do my best. I have about 45 pages. I'm just kidding. I do talk fast, so I'll do my best. My name is Jonathan Gray. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Baldwin County Board of Education, Superintendent Eddie Tyler. We have several concerns here. I'll start with the most obvious since this is a zoning hearing. If you look at the property from its eastern view, from its northeast view, it certainly looks as though it would be conducive to the area. There's already existing multifamily, and there is also an industrial aspect, which of course would be the school system application. That property is not zoned. The state property itself does not conform to local zoning. But if you look at this property from the western side, it's not conforming. It's all residential within that area. It is very low impact. The roadways that come in are not prepared for this. And to Mr. Brown's presentation earlier, the access road with which this teeny tiny notice of sign was placed is not drivable even by a car, much less an entire multifamily complex to access this property. We would ask that for those reasons, among others, that the Zoning Commission consider this a denial. We have serious concerns about the property's proximity and location to the school. The elevation and slope from top to bottom of this property is over 60 feet. The soil here in this area has been a massive problem for the school system, which is the largest complex in this area. We have softball, baseball fields on this complex, as well as football, that the mayor and the city council, who have invested a lot of money, can stipulate that the soil quality there is horrible. When it rains, we watch entire pallets of turf get up and float away. This creates massive erosion problems. Developing this area with what has been rendered in only a picture, and which will certainly be further discussed and become very controversial in a subdivision application, is going to be the stormwater runoff. We would propose and ask for a 50 minimum to at least 100-year retention ability in this property because of the elevation, and the retention pond is proposed only by the example to be built immediately upon the property line to the northern end of the boundary, which abuts a utility easement onto the school board's property where exists a $65 million school complex. I think we've all heard the stories about these things rupturing and washing out, and we have a tremendous amount of rain. The elevation in Spanish Fort makes it difficult, in addition to what I stipulated about our experiences with the soil. The last two things I'll speak quickly to. They are more to the subdivision regulation, but I think it is also applicable in the zoning question, and that is with regards to the use of the road. As Mr. Brown pointed out, if they're going to attempt to use Stagecoach, I think you have a serious highway department issue there under your zoning review. I don't believe that that area is going to satisfy the needs for what appears to be a 250-plus unit development with probably double that many cars coming in and out and parking there. But if you look at our south side, on the north side of the property to the east, they are using a shared asset funded by the taxpayers in some degree of access to another existing multifamily property. The taxpayers do not need to share a burden in providing the driveway into their property. We do not know if they intend to utilize this as access. They have not identified additional access, although engineering has specified additional access would have to be utilized. We have complete objections to this. We don't know who will fund the improvements. We will need level of service improvements, and then that access ties on to Jimmy Faulkner. Brings me to my last point. Again, we're looking at a significant change in multifamily. The school there has grown. We have capacity issues, which Mr. Wilson will speak to dramatically in just a few minutes. But we also have a security issue. We know no idea of how this change in zoning will impact the transitioning of people onto and off of the school property. This school property is not completely fenced in this area. We already have security concerns from some of the multifamily that's there about people coming onto the school property. We have liability issues. We have an open campus as it currently exists today. I would typically stipulate that that may be the property owner's concern, but the property owner is each of you and everyone in this room. And so the taxpayers will probably be left funding the bill to provide whatever additional amenities and improvements that they would need because of what they want to construct in this area. It is a serious concern, and it's one we knew nothing about until recently. That having been said, I would like to compliment Mr. Brown's office. The delay in communication, I don't know who on the commission asked for that. We're greatly appreciative. We want to have discussion. We would love to have discussion with the developers and try to come to some amenable resolution. Mr. Brown's office did send notifications. They didn't get to the right people. We have since talked, and we have a great distribution list of people that will be very attentive to these needs. So please accept our apologies. We were not intending to sandbag you with negative comments today at your public hearing. I promise you that that's not our role. But we are very concerned about this project, and we would be happy to answer any questions. If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, it probably would help if Mr. Wilson made his comments, and then we could collectively take questions on behalf of the school board.
That'd be
maybe?
fine.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Mr.
Thank you,
Wilson.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. My name's John Wilson. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Baldwin County Board of Education. And, what I'm here to talk about is something that, I think is a very serious concern. It's something that, we and the school board has been waving the flag for years, and it's really about our capacity. Let's talk about the schools in Spanish Fort. Unfortunately, trailers and portables are just a commonplace. Rockwell is the fastest growing school within the fastest growing district in the state of Alabama. 2 years ago, we rezoned Rockwell and parts of Rockwell enrollment to the Bell Forest, to new Bell Forest Elementary, bringing their enrollment down under 800 students. 2 years later, as of today, we're back over 1,000 students. Trailers and portables are back on that campus. We're experiencing growth that we just cannot sustain as a school system. We literally don't even have enough time to react to some of the growth that's happening in this area. This multifamily development project will most likely be zoned to Rockwell. I'm pretty sure this will be the 4th or 5th high-density apartment complex in the Rockwell enrollment zone. I'm not aware of any other elementary school with so many multifamily apartments in such a close proximity. Literally next door, across the street, basically walking distance. Not only are we at capacity with trailers in use, but we're completely landlocked. Baldwin County is, the Board of Education is opening a brand new school just a few miles away from Rockwell to help alleviate the overcrowding. But that's only bringing enrollment back to where we were in the previous levels just 2 years ago. We're unable to move kids within this multi-family development to a new elementary school due to multiple issues with transportation logistics. So I asked, with this project, how long until we literally cover up every bit of green space with trailers and portables and severely damage our best schools and some of the best schools in the state of Alabama? I mean, this is a serious call to help. We're trying to expand Spanish Fort Elementary to address capacity concerns. We are so landlocked that we're basically encroaching and impacting the city baseball fields to address capacity concerns. If this multifamily unit was zoned to Spanish Fort Elementary, space and capacity would be an extremely serious issue, especially during on-site construction period. We literally have no available space or green space because we're building on that exact site to expand at Spanish Fort Elementary. Every green space is currently being used as a laydown area, and we're having to take a bus to one of the city playgrounds just for kids to get outside and play. Just to give you an example of how landlocked we are right now. Spanish Fort Middle School is overcrowded and landlocked with portables and trailers. Part of the elementary school expansion plans is to address and move the 6th grade out of the middle school to help with overcrowding. Spanish Fort High School just had 15 trailers removed with a $10 million expansion that was built literally hanging off the side of a hill under wetlands. That's the only space we had available to build on that campus. To summarize, we've spent over $70 million the last 7 years to build new schools, expand existing schools as big as possible on this available land, all while still having to bring in trailers every single year to address this tremendous amount of growth. We literally cannot keep our head above water, especially in the Spanish Fort Elementary and Rockwell feeder pattern. Don't get me wrong, growth is good, but growth in this area is not being managed. It's borderline reckless. And if we do not get a handle on this, this will not only impact our schools, it's going to impact our county, our community, and our way of life. Thank you for your time.
Okay, I'm going to allow our planning, if anybody on the planning commission would like to ask any question of Mr. Gray or Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chairman, could you be kind enough to give us the capacity of the existing high school that's adjacent to this property, as well as the current population of the school?
The existing high school is 1,100 students. I think roughly around 1,100 students right now. I think we have a capacity of around 1,500.
Part of that calculation comes from the elementary schools that feed into this. There are currently only 2 existing in Spanish Fort. We are adding a 3rd up at the Triangle, which will encompass a lot of the growth you're probably familiar with on that 31 corridor going up. The problem with this project is the proximity with which it falls in the district. We're probably 2 years away from being able to handle more capacity. I don't think the zoning board has the ability to delay a project that long, but if it were to come up at that period of time, I think capacity would be a different argument. What Mr. Wilson was stipulating about capacity is not just the high school.
Yes.
We're able to track kids when they come in, and when we see families move in at multifamily, it's not 9th graders, it's little kids. And that's where the impact comes. It's not the high school. And we have literally hundreds of thousands of households that we've reviewed.
It was the high school until we finished a 30-room expansion. Now it's the elementary school that
And now when these kids move
concern.
into the multifamily developments, they started at the elementary school, which is where our capacity is. I'm not telling you, as Mr. Wilson said, we don't know what growth brings. But we know that right now we are at the head end of a 2-year project to completely redesign the feeder pattern and to create what we think is going to be about a 500 to 600 student capacity throughout the entire feeder system. I don't know that that makes anybody's job any easier, but 2 years would give us a much better look at where we are. The problem with today, we don't have room for more portables. I mean, it's easy to say it's the school system's job, just go drop another portable. There is no green space at Rockwell. There is no space to put a portable. Forget the fire marshal, we can't get the tow truck to back it in. Spanish Fort Elementary, as you've already heard, Mayor McMillan has been toe-to-toe with us because we're taking over their ball fields for laydown space to be able to build a $30 million elementary school over there. When we tell you we have no space, we have never come to you before. We have no space to lay a trailer. It doesn't exist at these elementary sites. And it's probably 18 months to 2 years before we will have capacity to take on what's probably another 200 to 300 children.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Gray or Mr. Wilson? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I have others that have signed up in opposition. Shannon Colley. Okay. Clewis Smith.
J.R. Smith, 31163 Woodland Way, Spanish Fort. I also serve on the City Council of Spanish Fort. I was on the Planning Commission for Spanish Fort for 15 years. I think everybody's fully aware that in the last few years, Spanish Fort had to put a moratorium on apartments because we were overrun with the number of apartments. I didn't check the numbers. I just found out about this meeting yesterday or last night. At one point, we had the highest per capita of apartments per people in the whole state of Alabama. That was about 3 or 4 years ago. I haven't looked into it today. And I understand that the property you're talking about is not in the city limits, but it adjoins the city limits, and it's going to affect all the other city services there. I don't think it's going to affect anything out in the rural areas of the county. It will affect Spanish Fort. I'm highly opposed to it. I think it's too much growth. I believe Daphne and Fairhope right now have entertained, if not passed, moratoriums on apartments because they're being overrun with apartments and the population that it brings in and puts on the city services. So I am opposed to it at this time.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, before you walk away, is the moratorium still in place on multifamily?
In Spanish Fort?
Yes, sir.
No, sir, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Smith? Okay, the last on my list, Mr. McMillan, Mayor McMillan.
First of all, I want to thank you for your service. I know the pay's great. Maybe they'll dub it for you soon, but I know it's thankless too. But thank you for what you do for the county. It's very important that we have good, qualified people that do what you do, and thank you for that. The City of Spanish Fort is very concerned about numerous parts of this proposal. Obviously, the overabundance of multifamily within our city. I think in my letter you'll see that with this, you're probably talking about 30% of our city versus single family is multifamily, and that's a big number. One that's hard to overcome. I also had a real issue, and this is not a mark against staff, but we got an email at the city on December 30th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you know how staff is right before a holiday. It went to a permit clerk, so I honestly did not find out about this until Tuesday morning, hence my late response and comments to Matthew and staff. The sign was not in a very visible place, as you could see from the pictures. So, and those are things that can be overcome. You know, those are not major issues. Very concerned about the traffic issues that this will create, ingress, egress. You know, they talked about tying in the Toro Ridge or not. I think that's subject to some changes. Stagecoach, that is, you may or may not be aware, that is the only way in and out of the high school in the morning and the afternoon. And it gets backed up unbelievable. Recognize that they have improved 31, but you still have a major backup there. It causes problems within the city, which is my concern. The school board, obviously, they have some issues with it, and I'm not going to address those, and I'm glad they're here to help us with that. I'm concerned about infrastructure, keeping up with what we've got going on. The growth in our county, particularly in Spanish Fort, is just unbelievable. It's a great thing, a good problem to have, but it is a problem, so we got to contend with that. I'm concerned with if they're not tying in the Toro Ridge, by fire department standards, every 30 houses require a second entrance into a neighborhood. This is 200 and plus units with only one way in. That concerns me safety-wise. A city is responsible for three things only: health, safety, welfare. To me, this checks the box of two of those three that is the problem: safety and welfare. I worry about the security of our kids right there adjacent to the school. So those are the things that are concerning the city. I ask you to consider that, and I look forward to any comments you may have.
Thank you, Mayor. Does anybody have any questions for Mayor McMillan?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all that I have signed up. Anybody wish to speak that did not sign up? Yeah. Would you like to speak? Go ahead.
My name is Tom Mitchell, and we developed the Toro Ridge. Same thing, had it rezoned here at the county 4 or 5 or 6 years ago. I don't remember. I want to address 2 or 3 of the comments. One is we think that we do a good job being a good neighbor. The first thing that we did with the school is the road that enters the Plaza de Toros Drive. We gave the school board 11 acres, just gave it to them to be able to build the access road to the school. And after that, then probably after the school was built, they ended up wanting expansion property. So we gave them the 7 acres that the gymnasium is built on now, gave them that property. And I don't know that anybody was here when that was done. It's not the same school superintendent, not the same people on the school board. I don't even believe are the same. And then I'd like to address the soil conditions up there. If anybody here remembers, and I'm sure some of the school people remember, the 26 acres that Toro Ridge is on was a dirt pit with base material, sand, and chert material, which is rock, a lot of sandstone rock in here. This site ties right into that site, and the hill keeps on going with the same type material. This site, zoned RA, was the site of a sawmill years ago. I think there's saw blades are still out there on the property. The other part about the moratorium, and I was trying on the way down here, I didn't know about how many apartments or anything else. I believe that Toro Ridge is the last set of apartments been built in Spanish Fort, and that was probably 5 years ago. Now I know I have no count for the houses. I probably wouldn't take much trouble to find a count for Rain Plantation, all of the sites that have been down and toward Loxley and everywhere else. but I would imagine it's at least 100 or plus houses a year have been built in Spanish Fort, which is way more than any apartments. I know of no apartments that have been built in Spanish Fort in probably 4 to 5 years. The moratorium in Daphne and Fairhope is in the ETJ, which is the 5 miles surrounding the city. It's not in their cities. It's just in the surrounding land. I don't know about Daphne. I do know about Fairhope. But the moratorium is on subdivisions, single-family housing. That's the moratorium, of which multifamily falls under subdivision regs in Fairhope. And so that's that. The fencing around this, when they built the gymnasium complex, they fenced the apartment complex off. And then when Sally came, or one of the storms came, blew all the fencing down, they told us it was our fence and we needed to build it back. And I had talked to some of the people in there that were back long enough to know that they built the fence. But we elected to build the fence back. They wanted it built back, so we elected to build it back. And we don't have a fence anywhere else on this property. But that's all that I wanted to correct some of the stuff that maybe some people didn't know. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Mitchell, just for the record, are you part of this development team on this project? Are you part of the, are you the developer on this project?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna need to recuse myself from the remainder of this conversation because of a pre-existing business relationship with Mr. Mitchell's firm.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Mitchell? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
David, did you have any other follow-up comments as representing the applicant?
Just really quick, Mr. Chairman, as far as the timing, as you all know, this is probably about a 5 or 6 months process just to get through the approvals to even start to break ground. Once they break ground, something of this size, it probably take at least a year to get the infrastructure in. Then you've got to build buildings. So somebody had mentioned a couple years. There will probably be nobody leasing anything for at least 2 years, probably more than that. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Deal. All right. I think that should have gotten anybody else that I missed. I'm gonna give you, yes, sir. Yes, sir, please do.
Thank you for allowing that. I'm Eddie Tyler, Superintendent of the Baldwin County Public School System. I do appreciate the work you do. It's very tough. Sometimes it goes unappreciated, just like the work we do in education. It's a tough business, and many times it goes unappreciated. We can talk about numbers, we can talk about zoning, we can talk about apartments, we can talk about egress, ingress, we can talk about all those things. Probably most of you are either parents, grandparents, have children that either teach or they're whatever form of education they're in, public, private, parochial, it doesn't matter to me, because at the end of the day, it's all about educating children. And that is my job. And I think you know, because you serve on a planning commission, that if education suffers in a county, large, small, medium size, the county suffers. All the services that come to a county because of education, that's why they come, quality. This school system provides quality of life to people, raise a great family, and a fantastic education. The third largest system in the state, will probably soon be the second. We can't keep up with growth. I got here in 2015. A school hadn't been built since 2009. Why? I don't know. I guess it wasn't a priority. But right now, we can't keep up. And we're building schools at no expense to the taxpayers. You know, we're trying to continue to build a quality of life where people, services want to come and be a part of Baldwin County. It doesn't matter. I don't know anything about construction. I don't know anything about RMF and Zone R and all that. All I know is if education suffers because We can't keep up with growth, and all of a sudden somebody comes and says, why are there 20 portables on the campus of Fairhope High School, which there were when I got here? There are no more. Why are these portables at Spanish Ford High School? Most have been removed. Why were there 11 portables at Swift School? Most have been removed because we have to rezone. I've rezoned going on 5 times since I've been back. And I've been in this system over 30 years, and I know of one rezoning that took place. So all I'm asking you is we can talk about numbers, we can talk about all the logistics, but think about the quality of life, think about the education and what it brings to this system, this county. So I do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Superintendent? Yeah. Mr. Brown, do you have any closing comments? Before you do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close the public hearing at this time. So, Mr. Brown, do you have any comments?
No additional comments, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commissioners. I appreciate the comments of Superintendent Tyler there. You know, we're the referees in this process, and y'all are like the recall booth. And, you know, sometimes that's a hard position to be in these tough decisions. So there have been great presentations, and I just want to reiterate so there's no misconception here that the staff's recommendation issued on this project was prior to additional information that's come in the past 24 hours. I do want to remind the Planning Commission that we have legal counsel here. We have a representative of the County Highway Department here. We also have our natural resource planner here, Ashley Campbell. If you have any questions for staff or questions for legal counsel.
Okay. All right. One more opportunity. Anybody on the Planning Commission have any questions for staff?
I just have, Matthew, I can't remember. If it were voted down, how long before it could be brought back so that the applicant was aware of that?
It's a 1 year.
Okay.
Matthew, would the staff...
Remember, you're recommending, so it doesn't stop here since it goes to the county commission. And then from there, that would start the clock ticking there.
Matthew, would the staff's recommendation change in light of some of this other information?
So I think staff, if we had had this information early on, we would have, it's compelling information because compatibility looks at 2 things. It looks at the compatibility in terms of form and that transition from intensity, less intensity, or less intense to more intense, but also looks in, is the infrastructure in place and ready for this? And obviously, I don't have the information they have, and they've presented to you tonight, but they've presented some information regarding the capability of the school system specifically in handling a development like this. And so it would certainly have weighed heavily in staff's recommendation.
Matthew, does what you're presenting tonight, does it meet, I know that we've got concerns on school and infrastructure, but does it meet what our duty is to move it to the next stage or not? Or do you, as a staff, what you're recommending to us, are we, considering all comments, but in the staff's opinion, is it meeting the letter of the law or what our duty is as far as the Planning Commission to move it to the next step, knowing that our role is a role and then it goes to the County Commission for them to consider that at that point?
All right, well, so that's a great question. And I have to remind everybody here that this is serious business, but I like to think of it as 2 different games. Maybe that's soccer and football or whatever. We're in the zoning game right now. And the zoning rules are different than the subdivision game. If the subdivision game was here, if they checked all the boxes, it goes forward. In the zoning game, it's a question of compatibility, which is understandably more subjective. And I feel like it would be inappropriate for me to say they've somehow checked all the boxes because there's not the same type of boxes being checked in this analysis. The information that's come in the past 24 hours brought this case from something that looked like something that we could feel comfortable recommending to something that I'm not going to say we would change our recommendation to denial, but I would not issue that same recommendation for approval without having more time to sit down and talk to the folks who have brought this information to us to before reissuing or changing that, officially changing that recommendation.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Yes, sir.
This is more of a technical question. If we chose to table this or delay it in some manner, would that mean it would be delayed for an entire year, or is there some other way we could perhaps give the staff the opportunity and the time to explore some of this other material and information that's been brought forward this evening?
So the Planning Commission can table an item and request more information. I would encourage you in that motion, if you choose to make that motion, to kind of specify some of the concerns that you felt like warranted gathering more information, just to substantiate that decision. And so that is an option for you. And then staff could go back and revisit and make a new recommendation if that's what y'all felt was appropriate.
Under those circumstances, I would like to make a motion. Have we closed the public hearing?
Yeah, but
I'd like to make a motion.
Before you make the motion, I want to make sure that everybody's had opportunity to ask
I'm
questions
sorry.
or have other comments. Anything else for staff? Okay. Before you make your motion, I want to be clear that we all understand. First off, this is, as our council has told us, this is a recommendation to the county commission. They will make the final decision on the rezoning. Second off, just keep in mind, we've heard both sides. We've heard specifically, when I say sides, specifically the school board's concerns. We've heard the applicant's comments to that. So our job is to weigh out the things that we've heard in the public hearing and make the recommendation. If you feel like there's information that has not been provided, then please, if you're going to table it, make a motion to table it, please say why. So, at that, if you're ready to make a motion?
I would make a motion that we table this to allow the staff to work with both the City of Spanish Fort and the Board of Education to better understand the issues that will be before it in terms of infrastructure and overall development of that portion of Baldwin County.
Okay. Mr. Booher's made the motion that we table this. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Mr. Mullick has seconded the motion. Anybody have any questions on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
We're going to do a roll call vote, please.
Daniel Nance. Ernie Church.
Oppose.
Oppose.
Oppose the motion, yes.
Robert Davis. Plummer Tonsmeyer. Jason Padgett. Michael Mullick.
In favor of.
Greg Siebert.
In favor of.
Bill Boer.
In favor of.
Okay, the motion fails.
Okay. So the motion to table has failed. So we need another motion. Either a recommendation to the county commission to approve or to disapprove. To disapprove? All right, Mr. Tonsmeyer's made a motion to disapprove.
Seconded.
All right, Mr. Nance has seconded the motion. All right, any comments? Everybody understand the motion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Let's do a roll call.
Okay.
I want to make sure. Your vote
okay.
is, if you're for the motion, it's to deny the request for rezoning.
Daniel Nance.
Yes.
Ernie Church.
I'm in favor of the motion.
Robert Davis. Plummer Tonsmeyer. Jason Paget.
No.
Michael Mullick.
Yes.
Greg Siebert.
Yes.
Bill Boer.
No.
Okay, the motion to deny carries.
Okay. So recommendation, we'll go move forward to the county commission to deny the request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let Mr. Bias return to our, all right. At this time, we're going to move back to the beginning of our agenda list. And at this time, I'll open public hearing for case number LU 21-000958, the Shambo Development LLC property.
All right,
Ms.
this
Boykin?
is.
Oh, let me do this. As always, does anybody need to declare any prior communication on this item prior to tonight? All right? None? It's all yours.
All right, this is a request for a commission site plan approval. The subject property is located in Planning District 15 and is Zone B3. The subject property is located on the south side of County Road 64. Its current use is a storage facility, and the parcel is 3.7 acres. As I stated earlier, the property is Zone B3. The applicant is requesting approval to rebuild a building that was destroyed by fire. If I recall, the storage units were built before Planning District 15 became zoned, or right at that time. And recently they had a storage unit that had burned. We had added site plan approval to our zoning ordinance, and anything over 5,000 square feet commercial has to come in front of you for site plan approval. So that is why they are here asking to rebuild that one unit that had burned down. You can see the subject property is surrounded by residential, and it's zoned RSFE all around it. Here's some pictures of the subject property. You can see in the bottom picture where the previous storage unit is, and they want to rebuild where it was. Here's a layout of what they plan on doing. They did receive a variance for the landscape requirements, just so they could build back exactly where they were. So they had to get a variance because they couldn't meet the landscape requirements. Here's the building elevations. Staff sees no issues with this request and has recommended approval.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay.
Now, I'd also like to state they're subject to the following conditions. They have 180 days to receive their building permit, and any additional expansion of the proposed structure, they'll have to come back to the Planning Commission. But the Planning Commission is also welcome to change that time period if they'd like.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Mr. Chairman, Commission, thank you for giving you my time this evening. It's a pretty straightforward site plan. There was a building that was destroyed, and we're putting another one back. Just like to make a little small clarification on the variance. The new building that we're installing does conform to the zoning regulations with respect to setbacks, but the existing asphalt and some of the existing buildings do not. So we had to get the variance for those existing buildings, but the new one will and does comply with those items.
Okay.
I'll take any questions if y'all have any.
Any questions for engineer? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have no one signed up to speak. Is there anybody that would like to that didn't sign up? Okay. Oh. All right. Any follow-up questions for staff? I'm going to close the public hearing then at this time. It's a pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we approve subject to the following conditions provided by staff.
All right, Mr. Bice has made a motion to approve. Second. Mr. Paget's made the motion, seconded the motion. Mr. Bice made the motion. Mr. Paget second. All right, any comments, questions before we vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, this time I'm going to open the public hearing for case number ZSP 21-0000046, Archer Commercial Leasing Property.
All right, this is a request for another commission site plan approval. The subject property is located in Planning District 15 and is Zone B4. It's located on the west side of County Road 54, and it's currently being used as a storage facility. The property is 6 acres. The applicant is requesting approval to construct buildings 3 and 4 of a proposed 6-building RV and boat storage facility. Buildings 1 and 2 are already there, and they are just asking for approval for buildings 3 and 4. You can see the subject property is Zone B4. It's surrounded by other commercial zonings, and it's also surrounded by residential zonings. Here's some pictures of the adjoining property and the subject property. It is allowed in B4, but since it's over the required 5,000 square feet, they do have to get site plan approval from y'all. Here's their site plan layout. This is their building elevations. The applicant is requesting for site plan approval for 2 80-foot by 210, which is about 16,800 square foot buildings to be used to store RVs and boats. Staff doesn't see any issues with this request and has recommended approval with the same conditions as previous. They have 180 days to receive their building permit, and any more expansions, or if they add any more additional buildings, they will have to come back.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, I have Mr. John Archer signed up to speak.
Good evening. Thank y'all for your time. I don't really have much to add. It's buildings 1 and 2 are existing. This is just a continuation of the developments of buildings 3 and 4. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. Entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the request with the conditions outlined by staff.
Okay, Mr. Church made a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Mullick seconded the motion. Okay. Any questions before we vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, at this time I'm going to open a public hearing for case number Z 21-000008, the Grodin Property.
Good afternoon. This is the Grodin Property. It is located in Planning District 15 and is currently zoned residential single-family 1. It's a 3-acre parcel. It's on the north side of County Road 54 and east of 54 West, and it is currently vacant. They're proposing to rezone to the RSFE residential single-family estate zoning. They purchased the property. It had been originally part of a 5-acre parcel, was zoned RA, rural agricultural, and it was rezoned by automatic rezoning in 2020 to allow the 2-acre parcel and a 3-acre parcel. The applicant would like to, they called to get the information of what they needed to build a barn, storage barn on their property. It is not allowed on an RSF1 property without a home, so they wanted to go ahead and try to rezone this. They can have the barn there by itself and then build the home later when they get ready. Here is the zoning map. Majority of the property in that area is rural agriculture. There is RSF2 in the area, Avalon subdivisions off to the south, and there is a subdivision to the west that's in the city of Daphne. Here are the pictures of the adjoining properties. These zonings are very similar. It seems like this would be a good transition between the rural and the RSF1. It kind of falls in the middle. It does allow a little more agricultural uses. They could have a horse there if they wanted, and like I said, do their barn. Staff felt this is a reasonable request and has recommended approval. Do you have any questions?
Okay, any questions for staff? Okay, there are none. Thank you.
Okay.
I have, I think it's Dave Grodin signed up to speak. Okay. Anybody have any questions for the applicant? Okay. That's all I have signed up. I will close the public hearing at this point in time and entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the rezoning request from RSF1 to RSFE.
This is a recommendation to the county commission. You're making a motion
Mike.
of approval?
Yes.
Okay, by Mr. Mullet. Second?
Second.
Is that Bill? Yes. Okay. All right, any questions, comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, at this time we're going to open the public hearing for case number Z21-000009. This is the Brown property.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself from this action.
Okay? Mr. Church is recusing himself on this item.
All right. This is a rezoning request. The subject property is located in Planning District 25 and is currently zoned B2. The property is just south of State Highway 180 and west of our road. Currently, the subject property is vacant and consists of 3.38 acres. The applicant is asking that it be rezoned to RSF1, residential single family. The proposed use is a residential PRD. The applicant did submit a rezoning request and the PRD request at the same time, but currently only the rezoning is going forward. We had to get additional information for the PRD request before we brought it to you. So that could be possibly could be at next month's meeting. They are requesting for it to be residential. As you can see, the subject property is surrounded by some RSF1 zoning, which is what they're asking for. To the east of our road, there is some B2 zoning that has a restaurant and a fire station. Here are some pictures of the subject property and adjoining properties. This is the current zoning requirements for B2. They could, by right, do anything under the permitted uses. But the applicant is asking for RSF1, which allows for 30,000 square feet lots. Here you can see some of the adjacent zone properties and ones that have been rezoned recently, well, since Planning District 25 became zoned. The other map shows where the restaurant, a residential home that's on a B2, that's probably was grandfathered in, and then the Fort Morgan Volunteer Fire Department. We have received some information from citizens. Mostly their concerns were with the PRD. Most of them were in favor of the RSF1. It was the PRD that they had issues with, but this is just for the rezoning request. The Fort Morgan Planning and Zoning Advisory Committee did talk about it at their last meeting, and they were in favor of the rezoning. Here you can see where it's going from, it could go from B2 to RSF1. And staff has recommended approval and sees no issues with this request.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman, a quick question on the change that would occur as a result of it being a PRD rather than just the rezoning. What would that do differently to this particular piece of property?
Well, in order to do a PRD, they need the single family, they need the RSF1 zoning. So they have to get that first, and then they can get the PRD. But the PRD is kind of an overlay to what the zoning is. So when they come back with the PRD, they're going to have to meet the density of the RSF1.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Chad Watkins signed up to speak. I presume on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir, on behalf of Mr. Brown. Thank you, gentlemen. Probably took me longer to walk up than it will to say what I need to say. But to your question, the PRD, if this rezoning is approved, intends to put 7 small cottage lots together, and the intention is to find a way that's acceptable to the county and Fish and Wildlife to donate about 65% of the property into conservation, because there's some significant habitat on the north side of the property. So that's where this is all headed. Any other questions, be happy to answer those.
I have one.
Okay.
I'm based on what I'm hearing, it seems like folks are in favor of the rezoning, and expect that going from business to residential, but may have some chatter on the PRD. Is your client fine with going ahead and moving forward with this rezoning? If PRD gets turned down, then he's lost his business zoning.
Yeah, yes. I don't believe that he sees, or any of the other parties involved that are tied into this deal, that the business zone is something that's going to work in the area, and that's them. So I'm just speaking on behalf of them. Another person would see it another way, but there has been no consternation about that option.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Mr. Watkins? Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
That's all I had signed up. I miss anyone? Any questions for staff? I'm going to close the public hearing at this time and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we recommend approval.
Mr. Bias has made a motion that we recommend to the County Commission for an approval for the rezoning. Mr. Nance has seconded the motion. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's approved. Wait for Mr. Church to return. At this point in time, we'll move back to our subdivision cases. Staff has asked that we move an old business item to the front of this list just because of what it's about, that it might have some bearing on some future items as we discuss. So, Mr. Brown, am I correct? This is not a public hearing on the Camellia place?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so you'll introduce case number S-20013, Camellia Place, Phase 1.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an old business item. We're bringing it to you out of abundance of caution. This is a subdivision that you've already given preliminary plat approval on. It was 101 lots, 32 acres, smallest lot 8,100 feet. There's the linear streets on there. Preliminary plat approval was on July 9th, 2020. The developer is 68V Camellia Place 2020 LLC, and the surveyor of record is SE Civil, and David Deal is here on behalf of the applicant. So again, the preliminary plat was originally approved in 3 phases. We're going to have some slides at the end that really help illustrate this. They then submitted their construction plans to Highway showing just 2 phases and have constructed the first of 2 phases. So you all approved it as a 3-phase development. They've constructed it as a 2-phase development, and now they've submitted to us a final plat application for that first phase. Going to kind of jump ahead to that. All right, so this is what y'all approved. You see phases 1, 2, and 3, and those red lines kind of show those boundaries between those phases. What was submitted for construction plan submittal was a 2-phase development, 1 and 2. What's actually been constructed now and that they're requesting final plat approval for is just this one initial phase of the development. So this is phase 1, phase 2 is forthcoming as they had construction plans approved. We don't see any problem with this. They've constructed all the required infrastructure. There's something in our subdivision regulations that say if there's no obligation for them to ever construct phase 2. It could potentially never happen, which would result in a different outer boundary than what you all approved in the preliminary plat. And there's something that's in our subregs that says that's a major change that would need to come back before the Planning Commission. So we're just bringing that before you. It's something you're gonna see this come up later on tonight, where we're doing something to address this on the front end, so we don't have to bring these. It's pretty administrative in a multi-phase, and then we'll fix it in the subdivision regulations down the road. But out of abundance of caution, bringing that to you tonight. So our recommendation is that y'all approve this phasing change of this development. If they can't get it done in 2 years, they're gonna have to come back before you for an extension for phase 2 of that preliminary plat approval.
Okay. Everybody understand? Any questions for staff? Okay. So we need a motion to...
Yeah, and I'm sorry I don't have a formal recommendation on the screen, but just a motion to approve the phasing change would suffice. And that's staff's recommendation.
All right, Mr. Nance has made a motion to approve the phasing change. Do I have a second?
Second.
Who was that? Oh, Mr. Seibert. Any questions, comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. At this point in time, we'll open a public hearing for case number PUD 21-000005, River Gardens RV Park.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm presenting this one today on behalf of Buford King, who's put a lot of work into this. I did just receive some additional information. I'm going to share it at the end before you open the public hearing about this project. So total property is 11.46 acres. Smallest RV space is 2,300 square feet. Minimum size of the space is 1,600 square feet. There's a 30-foot required perimeter setback, highway construction setback as shown on the plat. Engineer of record is Chris Lieb, who's here today. Surveyor of record is Matthew Kuntz. Here's an image of the plat on the screen, and I apologize, in your agenda packet, I think you just had the zoomed up version. This is one page of the final site plan. The entire site plan is on the public folder for viewing. But if you zoom up, here's kind of a little more of a zoomed up image of the site. For proximity purposes, here's a location map, and we're going to be discussing the Fairhope Falls case later on, so it's kind of helpful to see its location in relation to that case, since you're going to be seeing that case again. But it's just a little way south of 104 on County Road 48. So the subject property is located north side of County Road 48, approximately 2 3/4 miles east of State Route 181, between the town of Silver Hill and the city of Fairhope. You can see the parcel number and the PIN number there. This is an unzoned planning district 14. That is, the citizens have not voted to bring this under the planning and zoning jurisdiction of Baldwin County. The owner is Mr. Rodney Jones. Developer is Mr. Jim Center. Again, just an aerial view of that location map. Utility services, so we'll discuss some of those here. So water is Fairhope Public Utilities, sewer is or Baldwin County Sewer Service, electricity is Baldwin EMC, telephone is AT&T. The development density is 49 RV spaces. You divide that by the 11.46 acres, you end up with 4.28 units per acre. They're actually allowed to do 15 units per acre due to the fact that they're connecting to sanitary sewer, so they're doing half of what they're actually allowed to do on the site. A traffic impact analysis was not required. They were under the threshold of spaces for an RV park of what requires a traffic analysis. Delineated wetlands. They submitted a wetland delineation, and that was displayed with the appropriate 30-foot setbacks and 15-foot natural buffers, and those are reflected on the site plan. Here you can see the drainage report signed off by a licensed professional engineer on this project, and that, of course, was reviewed by the Highway Department as part of the submittal. So before I go to the staff recommendation, I understand we received a call today. I don't know if there's any opposition or what our public input is, but I feel like you all need to know this. We received a call today saying that today, I think, or yesterday, an email. An email came in at 2:14. Email came in at 2:14 today saying that they either just today or yesterday received the certified mail on this project. We sent those out 10 days in advance. That's what's required, and quite frankly, it's very difficult to do it much before that because we have to put our recommendation and notice and everything in there, and things get pulled from the agenda and things of that nature. So those were sent out, but I assume because of the holidays, it took that long for it to get delivered. So we don't know if that's the case with surrounding property owners, but I want to let you know that there's a claim here that folks didn't learn about this until 3 o'clock today on those neighboring properties. So this particular adjacent property owner was requesting that it be tabled. Staff recommends the requested plan unit development site plan related to case PUD 21-00005, River Gardens RV Park, be approved, subject to compliance with the Baldwin County subdivision regulations and any minor revisions identified by staff. They'll be cured prior to the submission of the plans for recording, and then ultimately the other permits that take place after that. Any questions for staff?
Any questions for staff?
Mr. Brown, I just wanted to be clear. This is in Planning District 14, which is unzoned.
That's correct. That's right. There's no compatibility check, and you know, I wish those citizens were here, quite frankly, so we could understand what their concerns were. And but if the concerns are compatibility, that's not something that we end up looking at in an unzoned area.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Okay.
Matthew, this may be a question for Mr. Lee. There's a few clouded comments on the site plan. Have any of those been addressed already?
So I will let him address that. Okay. I think Buford would probably be able to answer it off the cuff, but in our most recent amendment to the subdivision regulations to speed up our review process, we're asking them to cloud changes so that way we can review them more quickly. So I'm guessing that's what we're seeing here, but Chris can answer that.
Okay, Mr. Lee.
Jumping ahead on you there.
That's good.
Good evening again, and thank you for your time again. And to answer your question, the clouds were comments from staff that I have addressed, and so you do have the most current drawing that they have, and they are recommending approval on.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. So this is a RV park. We're going to have asphalt roads, concrete paths. We're putting in a significant natural buffer against County Road 48. So that's kind of tucked back in the woods and kept private. And we also have a buffer against that power line right away as well. So it's going to be, nestled back in the woods, and we believe it's met all the requirements, and by staff recommending approval. That's a second to that, our opinion. So if you have any questions or comments, I'd like to address them.
Are these for lease sites?
Yes.
Okay. Not for sale?
Correct. It's going to be kept under one ownership and leased.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Lee? Okay. I have Mr. Center. Would you like to speak? Okay. And I have one signed up in opposition, Reed Loper. Okay. That's all I have. Anybody else that I've missed? All right. Any follow-up questions for staff?
Just one clarification, is the fact that somebody claimed they didn't get notice, is that significant?
No, she did get notice, and it was sent out at the proper time, is my understanding. So we did everything that we were supposed to do. She just is saying she wished she had gotten the actual notice ahead of time. But our law is we have to mail them out by a certain date, certified mail, and she did receive it by the date of the public hearing today.
Thank you.
And one thing I wanted to throw out there, if it would make the Planning Commission feel more comfortable, and I appreciate legal counsel there, we feel comfortable that we met all of our requirements here. A sign was also posted on the site, which is not required by law, but it is actually the #1 way we get notice out. People see that sign. It's a pretty good size sign. It has a QR code on that they can scan to get information about the project. And we could temporarily set this item on the table if we wanted to, and our code enforcement officer, Robert Brown, is going to confirm the date that he installed that sign, and he even has photos of that and everything. And if that would make you all feel more comfortable, that just documenting for the record the date that the sign got installed out there. I'm just saying that as an option if anybody had kind of consternation.
I'm fine with what we've done myself, but I'll leave it up to anybody else.
I think we could, I'm fine with it too, but that's why I asked if it was unzoned, because, given that it's an unzoned area, we're a little bit limited.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? I'm going to close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I make a motion we approve.
Mr. Davis made the motion to approve.
Second.
Who's second? Mr. Tonsmeyer? All right. Any questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our next case will open public hearing on SC 21-000005, replat of Lot 5, Gardner Trace.
Good evening,
Good
Mr.
evening.
Chairman, Commissioner. I'm Fabio Waters. I will be presenting this on behalf of Ms. Booth. This is a replat of Lot 5 of Gardner Trace. Request for 3-lot subdivision, with the largest lot being 20 acres and total acreage of 26.20 acres. The survey of record is Mr. Lowery with David Lowery Surveying. The lots are directly across access from CC Road. Owner developer is Mr. Luther Baxter. As you can see here, north of in the intersection between CC Road and Gardner Road. Here's a parcel number. The subject property is currently zoned RA in Planning District 22. The utility providers here has water on site for a well, on-site septic tank. Baldwin EMC is providing the electricity, and we presuming that CenturyLink will be providing a telephone. No traffic study was required, as this is only a 3-lot subdivision and is under our requirement. The drainage document has been reviewed and accepted by the Baldwin County Highway Department. A professional wetland delineation indicating that there are no wetlands on site. Staff's recommendation that preliminary plat application for case number SC21000005, replat of Lot 5 of Gardner Traced, to be approved, subject to compliance with the Baldwin County subdivision regulations. There are no conditional for approval.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff? Okay. I have no one signed up. Is there anyone that?
I have one question. It appears there's a residence on one of these 3-acre lots. Does that pose any concern for what we're doing?
So, in a zoned area, you are allowed to have one dwelling per lot. So, periodically, we will have someone who divides up property with an existing dwelling, and as long as, because they're in a zoned area, they'll have to apply for a land use if they want to add other dwellings. And at that point, we would check to confirm they're not adding more than the allowable number of dwellings to that new lot.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing then. Entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we approve the replat of Lot 5, Gardner Trace.
Mr. Syverts made a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Second. All right, any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case we'll open the public hearing for is case SC 21-000008. It's a replat of Lot 2 of La Slava Springs.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ori King. I'm presenting this case on behalf of Mary Booth. This is a replat of Lot 2 of Slava Springs, preliminary plat approval requests. This is a 2-lot replat. The smallest lot is a ½ acre, largest lot is 9.4 acres, total of 10.03 acres. Setbacks are 30 front, 30 rear, 10 side. The slide, so just to kind of give you some brief history on this lot, it was previously deeded and recorded as 2 lots, but it did not go through our subdivision process. So the applicant is going before y'all today to come into compliance. The surveyor of record is Justin Palmer. The development density is 0.199 units per acre. There's no total streets being proposed. It has direct access to Underwood Road. The owner is Judy Gibson and Joseph Gibson. The owner/developer is Villa Glenn. This is a vicinity map of the property. This is the proposed plat. As stated, the subject property is located on Underwood Road in the Summerdale area. These are parcel numbers. The subject property is unzoned and is in Planning District 11. The utilities, on-site well, Baldwin County Sewer, Baldwin EMC for electric. Telephone is presumed CenturyLink. Staff comments, no traffic study is required. Drainage document has been reviewed and accepted by the Highway Department. A professional wetland delineation indicated there was no wetlands on site. There is, as stated earlier, this is an existing division of property that was not properly conveyed via the subdivision regulations. Therefore, the applicant submitted this application to come into compliance. Staff recommendation that the preliminary plat application for case SC 21-00008, replat of Lot 2 of Eslavo Springs be approved, subject to the compliance with the Baldwin County subdivision regulations. There are no conditions for approval.
Okay. I have one question, Mr. King, and I apologize, could have looked this up and probably pulled it up, but these drawings are so small. But I noticed there's a road on the west side of this property, an existing road. Is there an easement along the west side of this property, or is that road entirely off? You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I'm gonna pull up the survey and see if it says. I do not know off the cuff.
And that may be a great question for the surveyor who is here today as well.
Okay.
Let's see. Said it was 132.
I can answer that question. That road that's in question on the west side of that property is a road that goes to that where it's a business, Baldwin County Container Company, that is on the west side of the subject property.
Well, if the surveyor's here, I'll just let him come up and address. So I have signed up Mr. Palmer.
Justin Palmer with the Woodlands Group. I'd like to thank y'all for your time today and your service. And just to add some more clarity to why we're here and the lack of conformity to the requirements, this was deeded out from the previous owners to the current owners. One in 2015 to Villa Glenn and one in 2018 to Gibson from Ducky Johnson House Movers. So Ducky Johnson has moved on, and now the current owners are left to fulfill this replat. And then to answer your question about the road, it lies primarily west of the property line, but does come right across the northwest corner, but has been in use as such for some time, and we were not provided any documents for an easement.
Okay. It just would seem to me that if it touches the property at all, that you may, in platting this subdivision, you'd want to consider putting an easement across there. That's just me, but I'll let. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Palmer? Okay, I guess not. Anybody else that I missed on this item? That's all I had signed up. Any follow-up questions for our staff? Mr. King, you have anything else?
I do not.
Okay. I will close the public hearing then, and I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion we approve.
Okay. Rice made a motion approved.
Seconded.
Second. Made motions. Made the second to the motion. Do I have any questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's approved. Our next case is case number SPP 21-000010 Fairhope Falls Phase 4 and 9. I will recuse myself on this item, and Mr. Bias, as our co-chair, will open the public hearing for this.
With that, we will open the public hearing on this case. I'll ask the Planning Commission if anybody's had any prior communication other than staff that they disclose it at this time. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Matthew.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. And before I forget, I again want to recognize the staff members who've stepped in and helped out, and even some of the ones that you don't get to see very often. Robert Brown, he's the one who puts all the signs up and tries to find the best location, but not always can find, someone's always going to probably have an issue with the location. And then also Crystal Bates, she approves our exemptions, and we get sometimes 60 exemption requests. And so for those of you who don't know, or just to bring back to your memory, those are one-time splits of a property or a family subdivision that are exempt from the subregs. And a lot of work goes into those, and so just want to recognize some of those folks that you don't usually get to hear from up here. So this total property is 148.68 acres. This is phases 4 through 9 of Fairhope Falls preliminary plat request for those phases. Minimum lot size is 7,800 square feet. Setbacks are 30-foot front, 30-foot rear, 10-foot side, and 20-foot street side. Engineer of record is Dewberry. Surveyor of record is also Dewberry. You see the vicinity map here. I think for years I've seen this development going in, driving down 104, so this is a continuation of that process. Total number of lots is 541. That's for all phases 1 through 9 of this development. Phases 4 through 9 are 327 lots, and it's 2.2 units per acre, so relatively low density overall. Total street length is 16,000, approximately 700 square feet, linear feet public, and then almost 500 that will remain private, that goes over a dam, and I will explain that as we go. Right-of-ways are 50-foot wide with sidewalks, curb and gutter. Owner and developer 68 Venture, Fairhope Falls, LLC. Subject property is located on the south side of State Route 104, west of Fish River, near the intersection of Langford Road and State Route 104. You see the parcel number here. The citizens in Planning District 14 have not yet implemented zoning in this district, so it is what we call unzoned. The Fairhope planning jurisdiction in its current form is going to be shown on the next slide. So what you're seeing right now in the purple up on that map represents the planning jurisdiction that existed prior to Act 21-297. We're working with all the municipalities on this, but Fairhope has kind of unilaterally pulled back their planning jurisdiction in response to that bill. And this red line is a rough approximation. You're going to see something directly from their GIS on the next page. But what happened is when this came through and they pulled back their planning jurisdiction, suddenly their subdivision regulations no longer applied to this, except that there was an approved preliminary plat with their planning commission. And so the developer approached us, and there was dual review, so we were also in the process of reviewing these. And the developer said, to make this much simpler, can we see if Fairhope will revoke their approval, and we'll pay a new fee, do a whole new application, and run this through the Baldwin County Planning Commission. And then we'll know we're completely under Baldwin County's jurisdiction for constructing the roads and everything. The county will be responsible for those inspections. So here's the slide from theirs, and again, you can see the existing phases 1 through 3 on there and the approximate location of the new phases, and you can see Fairhope's new boundary from their GIS online map. Again, 147 acres. I'm not going to go through all these slides. That's phases 1 through 3, the existing phases. I'm going to focus more now on the upcoming phases. Again, these are those existing phases that was in your staff report. Today's request is for phase 4, phase 5, phase 6, phase 7, phase 8, and phase 9. You can see those lot numbers and acreages. Again, we've discussed the totals. All right, so real quickly here you can see the utilities, and then I'm going to show you a quick map of each of these phases. We're going through a lot of these, but it's already been gone through the Fairhope Planning Commission once. Most of them had completed a review of ours, they had at least, I think all had completed an initial technical review, which means they were just kind of in the cleanup phase. And now they've all gone through one more full review again. So this has been reviewed in this case. So just so you can see, because it took me a little bit reintroducing myself to this case for this presentation, here are how those phases are laid out in this whole site plan, because sometimes it's easy to lose that when you're just looking at a black and white drawing. And now real quickly, I'll go through each of those phases on an individual slide. This is phase 4. This is the one that includes the area that will remain a private road. We have the highway department here that can answer any questions, Wheezy Jeffers. And so this shows that section where that's between the 2 detention ponds there. That will remain private. Phase 5, phase 6, phase 7, phase 8, and phase 9. This is just kind of a location map, so you can see that location with the aerial imagery. This is rotated, so north is now to your right on the screen, but again, it's trying to overlay these final phases on the existing aerial photography. There's been a traffic report done. That traffic report's going to require improvements to the signal, or it's actually going to require the installation of a signal at State Route 104 and Langford Road. Highway is currently has plans in hand that they're reviewing that have been submitted to ALDOT, since that's a state highway. And that has to be installed prior to the final plat approval for phase 6. A drawing of the Langford Road intersection improvements is shown on the next slide, so you'll see that in a second. There's also been wetland delineations for this that have been reviewed, and all the proper buffers are shown on the plat. So here's the Langford Road improvements. I don't have a visual of the traffic signal, but I think we all know what those look like. That's proposed or going to be required at 104 and Langford Road. Staff comments, you see the approved drainage calculations here. Those have been reviewed and approved by the Highway Department. All 6 phases 4 through 9 are covered by those calculations. Staff recommends that the preliminary plat application for this case, Fairhope Falls phases 4 through 9, be approved subject to compliance with the regulations and the following conditions. Most of these conditions are very administrative, but I'm going to run through them. Traffic signal at Langford Road and 104 be installed prior to the end of phase 6. Coordinate withdrawal of previous approvals, phase 1 through 9, from the city of Fairhope prior to submission to Baldwin County of any final plat approvals for phase 4 through 9. Any prior approvals with phases 4 through 9 from us on a staff level are also withdrawn, and this will replace it, this approval. Subsequent final plat approvals will contain the overall phases of the development and phases receiving final plat approval clearly identified. These are the conditions continued. There'll be various routine revisions. That's a standard comment. Approval by the Baldwin County Commission of the private right-of-way traversing the dam area between common areas 14 and 15 prior to recording the phase 4 plat. Again, that's an administrative requirement for private roads. And then finally, this is why we had the old business item first. The approval of potential shifts of the phase lines during construction and prior to final plat submittal, so long as all required infrastructure is completed for any revised phase prior to final plat approval. So that way, if there's a little shift of an internal phase boundary, we don't need to bring that back in front of you. We can approve that administratively as staff. Again, here's the overall plat, and any questions?
Matthew, condition 7, so that essentially, that would not change the exterior boundary of the project. That's internal.
That's right. The only way it would change the exterior boundary, which is why we brought the one to you today, is if they never finish the subsequent phases. But it won't change the exterior boundary of what you're approving today unless they don't, but that they're not expanding it or anything like that. Does that make sense what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's kind of a nuance, and so we're just we're going to clean this up in a change in the subregs, and this is a way to make it so we're not burdening you with a administrative change down the road from a phase line shift.
And regarding the private road component over the dam, and I may have missed this in your explanation of point 6 here. Is that a way of sufficing to maintain that dual access within the subdivision? Because if you look at it without that private road, it's essentially 2 separate subdivisions that are connected by a private road piece across the dam?
So that's a great question, and there are representatives of the applicant here today who can answer that. The dual access thing comes primarily from fire marshal requirements and not necessarily our subdivision regulations. So I'm going to let them address that when they come up here.
Any other questions for staff? I have one person signed up, Miss Melissa Curry.
Hello, Melissa Curry with Dewberry Engineers on behalf of the applicant. I'm here to answer any questions, and so there's a question already brought up about the dam, so would you like me to just start talking about that first?
Sure, you can go right into that.
Okay, so there is some prohibition to the road being constructed over a dam in the subdivision regulations, and so that portion of the road had to remain private, and it will be maintained by the HOA association. There is no reduction in the standards that the road is being built to. It's built to all county standards. It's the same as the roads on either side of that dam. But the main purpose of that, obviously, is to maintain that connectivity between the different phases.
Anybody have any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Also, just a side note too about if there were to be any changes to any of the phase lines in the future, one of the stipulations is that each time that the phase would come before you, you would have the overall master plan so that you would always see where these are fitting in there. We don't anticipate changing those phase lines, but sometimes it's just because of construction, sequencing or materials or whatever it might be. Sometimes there's a need to shift a little bit. They're usually not very major changes, but a phase line change is a phase line change. And so as Matthew has pointed out, usually it's just sort of an administrative thing, but it wouldn't be anything major.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else signed up. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak? With that, we will close the public hearing. Ask Matthew to come back up if anybody has any questions. Any additional comments for us, Matthew?
No, and I think one reason you might say, wow, this is a huge subdivision, why isn't the public out here? Well, if you drive down Langford Road, they're already under construction, and the reason why is because there's an approved preliminary plat out there on a lot of these phases already. So the public kind of already accepts that these are under construction. And what they're doing right now, nothing is changing about the lots or anything. It's merely nailing down who has jurisdiction over this site and cleaning that up. And so I think in some ways the public has accepted the fact that this is in play at this point, which is why we probably haven't seen many. We don't have many folks out here.
We entertain a motion from the commission.
I'll make a motion that we recommend the preliminary plat approval for this case, Fairhope Falls, phases 4 through 9, subject to conditions laid out by staff.
A second.
So that second was from
Mr. Church.
Ms. Church. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It carries. I believe that was our last case. For me to turn it back over to the chairman.
Well, that's the last of our items for public hearings tonight. So this time we have any other business?
No, sir.
Okay. Any public comments? Anybody here that wanted to speak? Hear none. All right. Reports, staff reports.
The only thing I would mention here briefly is that we do have a survey out right now for our comprehensive plan. We're going to have some public meetings on, I think it's the 23rd, 24th, and 25th of January. Those are going to take place in Robertsdale, Foley, and Fairhope. We're also working on an additional one likely to take place in the Bay Minette area, covering North Baldwin. I also want to let you know that we are actually working very closely with the school system in this comprehensive plan. I think we've already met with them twice on it, but one very extensive meeting with the consultants. Some of the people you heard from today participate in that, and that's that's a really strong relationship that we're continuing to nurture, and I think it's a symbiotic relationship. We can learn a lot from what they're seeing, and we can hopefully help be attuned to what the challenges they're facing out there. The only other item I had is that we will likely be asking the county commission, and y'all actually approved this several months ago, but I'm kind of bringing it back up, to consider a number of, kind of like a buffet of changes to the zoning ordinance, small things to clean some stuff up. That will be something we'll present to you for you to make a recommendation on to the county commission. That's all I have. Thank you all.
Okay. Legal counsel?
I don't have anything to report.
Okay. Okay, our next meeting will be February 3rd. Hope we see everybody then. Nothing else, we are adjourned.